Top of the morning, Dan Proft here, talking about President's State of the Union speech. So much to pour over because it covered so much territory and introduced so many additional people. The use of special guests like never before seen, not since Lenny Skutnik broke the seal. One of the other issues, though, that Trump did not address that I wish he would have, and I understand. 2 hours, he got a lot accomplished in terms of covering policy issues, but in a perfect world, something that should be included in his offerings, school choice. The opt-in for the federal school choice program that the president included in the BBB, the Big Beautiful Bill, that even a Dem governor named Jared Polis of Colorado has signed on to, saying, as we covered on this show, I would be crazy not to take free money. People want to donate money to provide scholarship opportunities for kids in my state. Why would I not take that? Well, that's a question that could be put to a lot of blue state governors, including our very own J.B. Pritzker, who have, of course, reflexively opted out of free money, lest they draw the ire of the teachers' unions. It would have been good to make that point, too. And even in the context, particularly, of the disproportionate beneficiaries being minority families in this country, as has been the case with school choice programs at the state level across the nation. And put that in the context of what he has done, even though his opposition to DEI policies rankles some identitarians, what he has done otherwise to provide opportunity to minority families through things like opportunity scholarships at the K through 12 level, just mentioning, through his commitment in term one to historic black colleges and universities, to the Second Chance Act, and so forth, some of which was recently discussed and discussed again at the Black History Month event that he had at the White House. But it's good to include that in the overall offerings. For more on that topic, in part, please be joined by Juan Williams, senior political analyst for Fox News. He's got a new book, New Prize for These Eyes, The Rise of America's Second Civil Rights Movement. Juan Williams, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
Good morning. So in this piece in The Hill, you write about the distribution of the black vote in part, and the sort of historic representation of black Americans in public office around the country. There's never been more elected black officials.
Right.
And you write this: now the question for black voters is about the value of continuing to invest in pursuit of political power when white voters remain defiantly opposed to joining hands across racial lines. White voters resist a coalition even when the alternative is Trump's record of indifference to low-income white people, as well as demeaning non-white people.
Mm-hmm.
So, white voters, and I'm assuming you mean conservatives, because you're not surely criticizing white leftists. So, white voters are resistant across racial lines, and yet you have a president with a support of white voters supporting things like his school choice program, his investment in historic black colleges, his Second Chance Act, and so on and so forth. So I'm perplexed.
I must say I'm perplexed as I listen to you. I mean, just recently the president was putting out this, or reposting this meme of the Obamas as apes. I mean, that's pretty insulting by any measure. But it's, to me, I mean, this is like the other day when the press secretary said, how can anyone say the president, is racist? And people say, wait a minute, isn't this the guy who did the birther movement? I mean, that was the start of his political advance. And the guy who talks about immigrants coming from countries that are, profane, I'll just leave it at that for the radio broadcast. But to me, there's so many points of policy where you could take the position that you're offering this morning, Dan, and I agree on school choice. I think that the schools in our country really don't serve the kids, especially low-income minority kids who overwhelmingly go to still heavily segregated schools. Uh, I have my concerns about how people pursue things like vouchers because then it turns out that people who already have their kids in private schools are using that money to lessen the pain of their debt to those private schools instead of saying, hey, it's got to go to the poor kids who don't have a chance and help them rise up to the greatness of America. So, I mean, to me, that's the real conversation. I don't think when I talk in this piece about, an alliance between minority and white voters, the key thing that stands out to me, and this is something that when I was out on the book tour for my new book, talking to people about race, they would all, inevitably someone would raise his hand or her hand in the audience, and they would say, "I read here that you said that white voters have not supported a Democrat for president since 1964, Lyndon Johnson." That's wrong, isn't it? I say, no, that's exactly right. So we're talking there about white men and white women. Not one time have they supported a Democrat. Overwhelmingly, blacks and Latinos have supported the Democrats, and that includes moderates. We're talking about people like Jimmy Carter from Georgia. We're talking about Bill Clinton from Arkansas, but white voters never once supported a Democrat. So that's what I'm saying. Wouldn't it be amazing if you saw a coalition of moderate to conservative white voters say, you know what, we see common ground here and opportunities to create a different kind of politics in the country and appeal to moderate, maybe, left to center minority voters, not the radicals, and say, yeah, okay, let's not listen to the far right or far left. Let's listen to each other and create a new kind of American politics.
So are white voters monolithic? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, of course not. I just said, okay. I don't listen to the extremes. I just said that.
But I mean, single white women vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. So there's a cohort you have. Unmarried college-educated women vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. So there's a white cohort you have. So just like 20% of black men voted for Trump. So there's a cohort that I have, in terms of trying to bring more black voters into the conservative ranks in the Republican Party by extension, by function. So, is it so white and black, or is it based on, value and interest alignment, do you think?
I think you're talking about the fringes, and I think that, in the
fringes?
current political...
College-educated white women and single and unmarried white women are fringes?
Hang on, I'm your guest. You said you have 20% of black voters, and you cited that as saying that means you have that element. And I'm thinking to myself, so 80% voted against you. Of that, we're talking just men, because we're not talking about black women. That was even more opposition to Trump. But you're saying that 20% of black men means you have some inroad into the black community. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a fringe. That's what I'm saying to you.
Okay, it's a minority. Yes, I agree.
It's a fringe. 80% vote the other way.
Yeah, well, 80% of people support voter ID too, but that doesn't change the Democratic Party's position. So the point is to say you can turn 20% into something different. People move around, including among racial demographics. People move around. But my point is to say, on the other side, so my 20% of black men who voted for Trump, that's a fringe. Your majorities of single white women and college-educated single women is that a fringe too? I mean, you're the one who wants to do this along racial lines. So I'm just trying to understand what the terminology is here and what constitutes a fringe that's to be dismissed and what doesn't.
Well, there's majorities as opposed to fringes, and a majority of whites have not voted for a Democrat, any Democrat, even a conservative Democrat, since 1964. And
so that's the problem of white people, but it's not a problem that 80% plus of black people have not voted for a Republican since forever. So we've got a problem with whites who are majority, slim majority, voting for Republican presidential candidates, but we don't have a problem with blacks that are voting in supermajority for Democrats.
Exactly wrong. You know, what
Well,
I was
okay.
saying to you goes back historically. I think you need to put some history to this. Remember that
Mm-hmm.
after the Civil Rights Act 64, Voting Rights Act of 65 was passed, Lyndon Johnson, uh, apocryphally said, the Democrats have lost the South for a generation. Now, you can say, oh, was that a racial statement? Well, it was coming from a white president from Texas who was saying, oh, now the Republicans are going to exploit racial division in the country to lock in white voters, especially those in the South. And guess what? He's right. He was he forecast exactly what has happened because previously you had, yellow dog Democrats in the South who would vote for a Democrat, but no longer is the case that any state in the South goes for the Democratic Party after 64. Now, you might say to me, I hear you saying, oh, Juan, you're putting this on a racial basis. I'm telling you, Dan, racial politics, this is the history I'm talking about. Racial politics are central to the American political story. And that's why I said the majority of whites, to repeat, have not once gone over and voted for a Democrat, even a moderate to conservative Democrat.
And so. So
Well, that
why is that? Why is that like particularly a racial problem in your view? I mean,
because I think the
explain.
politicians exploit racial appeals. What did Dr. King say? You can feed people the bread of hate instead of actually giving them bread.
I see. So Republican candidates are winning a majority of the white vote by dog whistling and appealing to racial animus. So therein lies the problem, and no other politician, certainly no politician on the left, is engaged in any sort of racial identitarianism that exploits latent animus. Is that right?
We have. You're talking to a guy who knows about bad actors in terms of black and Latino politicians.
Okay.
I've covered them, but I'm saying to you that it's hard to match when you have J.D. Vance and Donald Trump talking about black people, Haitians in Ohio eating white people's pets. That's pretty low, dude.
I think it was, the issue. I mean, first of all, this like selective like memification of politics to the exclusion of substantive policy is not particularly persuasive. You're talking about some stupid meme that either Trump or a staffer let get past the goalie that shouldn't have been posted, and comparing that to a national school choice program, comparing that to historic investments in historically black colleges, universities, comparing that to the Second Chance Act. I mean, that is apples to orange groves. It's really silly, actually.
Yeah, I think it's very silly when you understand that I was talking to you and you were talking to me about how white conservative politicians send out, you said, winks and nods and other kind of racial messages in order to lock in white voters. That's what we're talking about.
Right. The same politicians that are at the tip of the spear for what I think you used to call the civil rights movement of this generation, which is school choice. The same politicians that led the essentially broke the seal on school choice, like Tommy Thompson with Polly Williams in Wisconsin, and going back 35 years now. I mean, this has been a movement that has been driven by an interesting and racially diverse and economically diverse coalition of people, which is why you have school choice programs in a majority of states now. And that's just given short shrift because you want to argue about the salient, intemperate word or silly meme of the day. And I just don't understand how you miss the forest for the twigs when it comes to substantive policy and impact on people's lives.
Well, first of all, you're talking to someone who's a school choice supporter. I think
know.
You said that at the start.
I know.
So that's not the issue. The issue in terms of substance is trying to create a coalition of people that could lessen the racial and political polarization in this country that goes way beyond just the school choice issue, that goes to solving some of our problems, that goes away from things like coming down the golden escalator and declaring that the Mexicans are rapists and thieves. I
Okay.
mean, that. Talk about a racial appeal
More,
off the bat. Wow.
more meme politics. You're gonna
Oh,
are you gonna give me a bastardization of what he said at Charlottesville next? What is it exactly that you want? What is it that you want? What is it that quote unquote white America, or the majority that votes for Republicans, which is a combination of slices of white America? What is it you want from them exactly, policy wise?
Oh, policy wise, I
Yeah.
would. We agree on this, Dan, that we would come back to what. Let's act not out of fear, but out of hope, and let's fix the schools. I would say that would be a big one for me. And school choice is part of that. Just get some innovation in there and get away from seeing the teachers' unions dominate in terms of their interest and their pensions and their protections for people who cannot do the job in many cases.
If that's your
So you and I would agree on that.
well, I know, but here's the thing. So if that's your priority, you already have the white Americans voting Republican on board for that. What you don't have is your party that is beholden to the teachers union on board for it. White, black, Latino, Asian, etc. I mean,
Yeah,
so I don't.
you have a good point. I'm not. Look, my feeling though is you should realize that when you come to this point, the racial politics of the country is so polarized that you can't get the Democrats out of that box. And I think we need to do that. Okay. And I think we need to get Republicans out of a box where they're using the vouchers to pay for religious schools, the Catholic schools, or the private schools.
Come on.
That they're already attending. So, I mean, let's just be honest and stop lying and say, oh, it's the Democrats because of their support of the union. No, you know what? We still live, and I think you and I can see this, no matter the color of our skin. We can see how segregated America's public schools remain to this very moment.
Yeah.
If you talk about the private schools, forget about it. Totally segregated. So, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yes, it's segregated. It's segregated in places like Chicago, where you have had one party rule for 100 years, where you have had two successive black mayors, both to beholden to the teachers' unions opposed to school choice. And you can repeat that story in major cities across the country, as you know. We have de facto segregation in Chicago, for example, at the hands of your party's politicians for a century. But that's the white guy's fault. I just find that hard to reconcile. The flip side is to say we're polarized by race, which I think is actually overstated in terms of how most people live their lives on a daily basis. Certainly, it is for me. But even to the extent that there is truth to that, it is because we obsess about conferring benefits and imposing responsibilities and ascribing bases for grievances strictly along racial lines without any other contextual factors. The politics is so banal and ham-handed that it begets this sort of circular discussion that we're having. I mean, if you could just sign on to the actual policy and recognize the allies you have on a policy position we both share, then the point is to move beyond race and just talk about opportunity that is colorblind, if you will. I thought that was the point.
I agree. I think that's right. That's what the whole argument that I've been trying to make to you is about, that if we could get away from the racial politics, if people could say, you know what, I'm not going to respond to these, provocateurs, and as you were saying, they're trying to create these viral moments or these memes or whatever, and mocking people and belittling people because of the color of their skin or their ethnicity or their heritage. Get away from that, and actually look at what is good for you, your family, your economic position, your children's education, the future. And I think there would be lots of common ground across racial lines. But I don't think it's possible at the moment because, when you look at Trump, for example, he has succeeded in using white racial grievance to lock in the white vote. And people don't look at terms of what's in their best interest on the broader scale. You're picking one issue. school choice. And I, as a black person, agree with what you're saying. So, I mean, I don't think we're arguing, but I would love to see that on a broader scale. And, you talk about economic issues. Wow. Imagine if black and white people said, you know what, we're going to put economic issues first, and they came together. That might be the most powerful movement in the history of the United States.
Juan Williams, senior political analyst for Fox News. The new book, New Prize for These Eyes, The Rise of America's Second Civil Rights Movement. New Prize for These Eyes, the author, Juan Williams. Juan, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
What a pleasure, Dan. You know what? I enjoy our conversations because they are lively.
Yes, me too. I do.
Yeah.
We'll have you back soon. Thanks, Juan. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
And Juan joined us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
There's nothing wrong